My shop has now been updated with a bunch of cute holiday themed items like these cat ornaments. How adorable aren't they? There is also greeting cards, and let's not forget the very fun and also very adorable 2025 calendar. Perfect gift for any cat lover. Link is in the description. Thanks for looking. Ohuhu has been spoiling us with good and affordable alcohol markers, 100% bleed-proof marker paper. What else will they come up with? What about water-based markers that don't tear the paper? Sounds like magic to me. So yeah, I'm gonna do a few tests to see how they work and compare them to other water-based markers. Are they as good as they claim to be? I will also do some art with them, of course. I also like to mention that Ohuhu did send these to me to try out and review, but as usual, all I say will be my own and honest opinion. So as I mentioned, these markers are specifically made to not damage or tear or eat the paper. They are marketed as paper friendly, water-based ink, vibrant colors, paper durability ensured, we will see about that, and non-toxic. And they comes in a set of 60 in this very nice case. And at first I wasn't sure if this was a U or an A, but I looked it up and it is a U. So apparently it says pupe or poop. I'm not sure how to pronounce that without it sounding weird. Maybe it's pupe. I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna refer to these as markers or color markers or the water-based markers. And inside we got color swatches and a swatch card. And I really like these cards that you can fill in yourself so you can see what the actual colors looks like. And yeah, here we have the markers themselves, and we have even more underneath. I feel like this is a pretty good range of different colors. We got some earthy tones, we got some vibrant tones. Here we have the marker itself, we got the color code, and these are dual tip markers. So at one end we got a very nice brush tip, and at the other end we got a fine liner tip. Looks like a 0.5 maybe. And I actually really appreciate that the markers comes in a case like this instead of a plastic box, for example, or the soft fabric cases that the Ohuhu markers usually comes in. I feel like you get a better overview, and it's also easier to store it away in your bookshelf or something. So far it's looking good, but let's put them to the test. I'm doing a very quick swatching before moving on to the test. So here you can see all the different colors. Ohuhu wanted me to mention that even if these are paper friendly markers, there will still be some tearing of the paper when getting to a higher amount of layers. And if you would like to check out these Ohuhu paper-friendly water-based markers yourself, there is a link in the description along with a discount code. Alright, so we have here some regular copy paper that I folded in half. This paper is a little thinner and not really made for any kind of water-based mediums. So any kind of water-based marker should be eating through this paper quite quickly. And we have a regular water-based marker, also with a brush tip, very similar to the Ohuhu markers. This brand is actually one of the better water-based markers, so I thought it would be interesting for the test. So now we're gonna see how many layers it actually takes for a regular water-based marker before it starts affecting or damaging the papers. It is a squeaky marker, but we have the first layer. No tearing so far, but the paper is starting to warp a little. 3. And 5. No tearing so far, but the paper fibers are starting to lift. So I'm just gonna go until the paper starts to tear. So 10 layers and the paper looks like this. There's no hole straight through it, but I would say that the paper is kind of damaged. We have all of these little paper worms appearing, so about 4 to 5 layers before noticing the paper fiber starting to crumble, which is where you should stop before the paper starts to tear. And around 7, 8, 9 layers the paper really gets damaged. Now let's try the Ohuhu marker. We have the first layer, 2, a little bit of warping, but no crumbs so far. The paper still feels intact, but I can see just the tiniest little crumbs. Layer number 6, 7. There are just a few tiny little crumbs. 8 and 9, 10. I could actually feel the paper starting to tear just a little. There are a few paper crumbs, but not nearly as much as on the other ones. Editor's note here, sorry if I sound a little underwhelmed. I am actually super impressed by how this marker performed on this super thin copy paper. Well done, I say. I want to see what paper would be best suited for these markers. Copy paper would perhaps not be the first choice for any artwork. I have regular thick drawing paper, Bristol board, watercolor paper, and also the Ohuhu bleed proof paper. I have already made the regular water-based marker swatch, so we can compare them just for fun. I made a test with 5 and 10 layers, and if you're wondering why I'm using so much paper for such small tests, my initial plan was to do more tests on these papers, but I ended up doing it on another paper instead. Anyway, all the papers held up really well. I think the watercolor paper was the only one that had a little bit of paper crumbs on the 10th layer, but that is still really good. It did a lot better than the regular marker anyway. The bleed proof paper did great, but unfortunately, because of the special coating of the paper, the ink just sat on the surface and it took forever to dry, so I will not be using that. The drawing paper and the Bristol board were also great and very even, so I'm going with my trusty old Bristol board for the final art. And before diving into the art, I wanted to do just a few more tests. First I tried doing a gradient just to test the blendability of the markers, and I feel like it is definitely possible to blend them, perhaps not as smoothly as alcohol ink obviously, but you can definitely blend these markers. Coloring larger areas can be a little tricky with regular water-based markers. It usually turns out streaky where the pen stroke meets and overlap, but it seems like the Ohuhu markers gives a very nice solid color. It also seems like the colors layers very well on top of each other. I was also curious to see how the colorless blender pen worked, so I drew with it on top of a solid color, and it seems like it's working a little bit like the alcohol blender pen, where it pushes away or lightens up the color underneath, which can be good when smoothing out color edges. So yeah, with these tests I'm ready to tackle the final illustration. I will get into all the details and my thoughts about the markers when making the art. So for this illustration, I want to make something with a lot of colors so I could really test out the markers. And I realized I haven't drawn my little kitty explorer Kit in a while, so I decided that he would be in this art. I made him sitting on a stone surrounded by plants and flowers and mushrooms, and in my mind, Kit is like a normal-sized cat or person character, but for some reason I made him tiny compared to the plants around him. But I guess this is a magical giant forest where he is, of course, exploring. Right now he is resting though, enjoying the beautiful view. So let's dive into this. So what I first noticed is how smoothly the markers draw on the paper. I assume it depends on the paper and how much texture it got, but it was very satisfying. Something else that I quickly realized is that these are not alcohol markers, and I am not comparing these water-based markers to alcohol-based markers since they are two different mediums and they don't work the same, but I kind of had to change my whole mindset regarding the coloring process. I am used to alcohol markers, and usually with alcohol markers I go from light to dark when blending the colors. So I did the same here, but I noticed that it didn't quite work. Unlike the alcohol ink, the water-based ink doesn't go into the paper fibers and mixes with the surrounding colors to make smooth gradients. You will have to work a little more to blend the colors with a water-based ink, and then going from dark to light is easier, in my opinion, when you can sort of overlap and smooth out the darker colors with the lighter. The ink is translucent or see-through, but the colors are very pigmented and vibrant. They do appear a little darker when they're still wet, but that goes for all water-based mediums, I guess. What impressed me a lot is that the ink is very covering and it gives a solid finish, meaning that it doesn't appear streaky, especially if you take your time and work with denser, slower strokes. Usually with water-based pens, when coloring larger areas, there can be lines where the pen strokes meet or overlap, and the colors can appear streaky or uneven, but with these markers I feel like it was much easier to get an even coverage with no streaks. And the good thing is also that you can layer the markers to even out the colors even more, but just keep in mind that the more layers that you'll add, the darker the color will be, which you can use to your advantage too if you want to build up the intensity of the color or if you want to add shading. So I was basically just playing around with the markers, testing different things, trying to figure out how to approach the different steps of the process and the coloring style. I am not used to working with water-based markers, so it was a lot of fun just playing around. Already, I think these markers would be great for coloring books, for example, or bullet journaling, or making doodles in sketchbooks. Flat, even colors doesn't seem to be a problem, and they won't damage the paper. But the reason I wanted to make a full illustration is that I really wanted to push the markers with a lot of layering and blending, and I have to say that I am super impressed with how much I could actually layer the markers without tearing or damaging the paper. Not even a single little paper crumb appeared, and I must have made at least 10 layers on some areas, and it held up so well. The markers are definitely more gentle to the paper, and as long as you're using a light pressure and don't rub the pen nib on the paper too much, you can achieve many layers. And I noticed that it also helps to let the ink dry between the different rounds of layers. So to conclude my experience and thoughts about these markers, they are definitely what they claims to be, paper friendly. I don't think I would have been able to make this kind of illustration with all the blending and layering that I did with regular water-based markers. Very impressive. They are pigmented with even coverage. They also blends nicely once you get a hang of it. I think I managed to achieve some nice gradients. We get a good range of different colors. Personally, I would have liked even more lighter tones, so I'm hoping for a pastel set in the future. Maybe that would be nice. I really like that the markers comes with a fine liner nib, so now you will have a whole set of colored fine liners too. I also didn't notice any smudging, neither while they were still wet or when they had dried, even though I dragged my hand all over the place. Another thing that I like is that the ink doesn't bleed or spread on the paper like alcohol ink does. You can color right next to the line work and it won't go over or across the lines. However, once you've laid down one layer of color, the paper surface will become a little more porous, I suppose, a little textured, like the paper fibers are rising a bit. So if you want to add finer details on top of that color layer, the details might spread a little in the fibers and look fuzzy. That is something that I noticed when I started adding line work and details with a fine point tip of the markers. I guess that is the only negative thing that I can think of right now, but overall, great water-based markers that do what they say, and I think they're perfect for coloring books, sketching, and even full illustrations like this, and I can really recommend them. So as I mentioned, I outlined everything with a fine liner nibs and I think it really brought it all together. I also added some details with the Ohuhu paint markers. Also, you may have noticed another little character sitting in the flower leaves, perhaps a forest sprite or something. I probably shouldn't have made it brown, it kind of looks like a little poop. It is cute though. I really like how this illustration turned out. It is so bright and colorful and it was a lot of fun drawing Kit again. Let me know what you think of the art and who is this little forest poop sprite that is following Kit. But yeah, there's my little review of the paper-friendly water-based markers from Ohuhu. If you'd like to check them out yourself, there is a link in the description along with a discount code. Thanks Ohuhu for letting me try these, it was a lot of fun. And thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video. That is all for now, I will see you next time. Keep drawing my happy cats, bye!